Welcome to another Mondays with Melissa. I'm excited because it's finally summer here in the Pacific Northwest. I look forward to the day that I get to wear tank tops and shorts and sandals or no shoes, and the day has finally arrived. So I'm very excited about that, just to let you all know. And today, you guys, I was going to have another episode for today. And because what I originally wanted to do was talk to you about my own journey with therapy and EMDR, because last week Christina shared with us about EMDR. She is an EMDR therapist. That's one of the modalities she uses in her therapy. And so she came on and she shared with us about what it is and all the things. If you haven't listened to that episode, you should go back and listen. And so I originally was going to talk about my own journey, and then I got nervous and I got into my head and I thought, you guys don't want to hear about that. And so I recorded another episode that was good information, but not about EMDR. And then my husband brought it up and he was like, so next week, are you going to have your episode be about how you use EMDR? And I was like, gosh, I wanted to, and I got scared. And so he encouraged me. And so here I am re-recording. Don't worry. The episode that I had originally planned for today, I will still drop it at some point, just not today. So today you guys are going to hear about my therapy journey. And so it's kind of like another story time, right? If you go back to episode, I believe it was 8, you will hear me talk about my story, about my childhood, about being in an abusive marriage, about how I realized I needed therapy. And so it might be interesting for you to go back and listen to that one to kind of get the backstory, because I'm not going to go into that today. But today I'm going to talk about from when I started therapy and what that looked like and what my journey has been like. So if you did listen to episodes 7 and 8, 7 is when my daughter Haley was on and we talked about her healing journey and kind of what she has been through and how she realized she needed therapy. And then episode 8, I told my story. And I can't remember in which one of those episodes, but we talked about this one specific situation that happened with my daughter Kiana when she was probably 2 or 3, where Haley just looked at me and was like, Mom, you're not well. I mean, she didn't say that, but I don't remember what she said. And it was later that night that I came to her crying and said, you're right. I need help and I'm going to go get therapy and I'm going to do better. And that's what started my journey. And so if you think about, I had been a parent for 11, 12 years already before I got into therapy. I had Haley in counseling when she was 2 or 3, when I left her birth dad. And that was a really yucky situation. It was really hard. And she went through a lot and it was hard for her to process as a little toddler. And so I had her in counseling and it was really helpful. And I was involved in that because when you have a 2 or 3-year-old, you don't just have them go off into therapy and the parent's not involved. Some people do that, but that is probably not best practice. And so, in my opinion, and so I was involved in her counseling, but it wasn't specifically for me and my stuff. And so, gosh, it took until she was 12 or 13 before I realized, like, yeah, I'm not well. This is not working for me. I am triggered a lot. I have anxiety. And so it started with me actually going to my doctor and talking to my doctor about it because I didn't even know where to start with how to find a therapist. So I went to my doctor and she prescribed me a medication to help with my anxiety because we were through talking. This is really Cliff's notes. So just know that there was a lot more. There was conversation. There was, it wasn't just like I went to my doctor and she gave me a prescription. There was more than that, but this is long story short. She did give me a prescription, an anti-anxiety medication, and we tried out some different doses and finally got onto a good dose where I felt like, oh my gosh, I finally can feel like I can think clearly about situations that are happening around me and I'm not getting tunnel vision and I'm not getting overwhelmed by my overactive nervous system. And so then we talked about some good options for therapy. And so the person she gave me didn't work out because of my insurance. And so I ended up just with somebody that my insurance had recommended or said that I had to see. I honestly can't remember. And I got lucky because I liked her. She was great. She was an older lady who was just really sweet and kind and understanding. And one of the things, though, was that we didn't talk about my past. We talked about my anxiety. We talked about my anxiety attacks. We talked about how I would get tunnel vision and kind of shut down, but we didn't go back. We didn't talk about my past. And then, honestly, in that moment, I was okay with that. And so what we did do, though, is we did a lot of work on mindfulness. We did a lot of work on grounding. We did a lot of work on how to help me get centered again when I was having panic attacks or when I was feeling overly anxious about situations. And I saw her for about 2 years, and it was helpful. And then it got to the point where it just wasn't helpful. And I felt like I was at the end of what she could help me with. And so we parted ways. I ended my time with her and had every intention of finding a new therapist. And then life got in the way. And so that was it was probably 4 years went by before maybe even 5, before I finally realized that I needed to get back into therapy. And so here's what happened, y'all. During that time, I had read The Body Keeps a Score, and I had read The Deepest Well, and I had learned about ACEs. And so I knew that, in theory, when I go back to get therapy, it'll be a trauma-informed therapist. And I was so great at telling the families that I worked with that, therapy is great and make sure you find a trauma-informed therapist. But I just wasn't doing that for myself. And so then COVID comes along, and literally it was like a month of being quarantined, and I was out of my mind, and I was back to I was just tunnel vision all the time, panic attacks. I was not well. And so I started my own search for a trauma-informed therapist. And by that point, we had different medical insurance. And so it actually opened up some more doors for me, which is really a struggle, I think. And it's really frustrating for me that insurance can be such a barrier to people getting good therapy. But that is the truth. And so it's there. It's a fact. I don't know what to do about that personally, but that's just the reality of my situation, that when I had a different insurance, it allowed me to find different therapy options. And so I did a search for trauma-informed therapy. And I also made sure that I found an agency that was familiar with EMDR, because I had read The Body Keeps a Score, because I had learned more about ACEs, and because I just knew more. And so that is how I found my therapist. And she was not an EMDR therapist when I first started seeing her in May of 2020. But she was knowledgeable in trauma awareness, and she was actually in the process of trying to do the EMDR training when COVID happened. And so I knew within our first time meeting that it was going to be a good fit, because eventually we'd be able to do EMDR, and that she had great modalities to use with me in the meantime. So we did a lot of tapping. We did mindful meditation. We did breath work. I did tell my story. I went back and I told it. And it actually, even just doing that was so therapeutic for me, to be able to share what had happened to me through my childhood and into my teen years, having a teenage pregnancy, being in an abusive marriage, and just like how that all snowballed into what was happening now, as I think at the time I was 39. So we did a lot of good work, body scanning, and it was super helpful. And so then I want to say January or February of the following year of 2021, she was able to do EMDR with me. And so of course we started that right away, because I was so excited. And so basically we made a list of and I believe that this is how it works with EMDR, that you list out the things that have been really heavy and hard, and things that you want to work through. And so, my list involved things from my childhood. My list involved things from my teenage years. My list involved my abusive marriage. My list involved the my list involved an accident that one of my daughters had right at the beginning of COVID that was super traumatic for all of us, more so for her, but also we had it was really hard. And then finally, the last thing that was on my list was there was a situation at one of the places that I worked in November of 2020, where a male coworker really abused his power and was emotionally abusive towards me. And it really affected me, and it really affected my marriage, and it affected John and I, and how we were able to communicate about it. And so I added that to my list. And that was one of the things that I had to work through and process. And so I did that. And here we are 2 years later, and I have worked my way through the list, and we have processed all the things. And I could give you so many examples of ways that I know that it worked, but I think the two that stand out for me the most right now in this moment, because they were the most recent and had the ability to have more present triggers for me, was the first one was my daughter's accident. She had an accident that was near our home. And so every time that I walked by that place or drove by that place that accident happened, or any time that we had to go to a medical appointment, it affected me. My nervous system shut down, and I, on the outside, would hold it together for her sake, because she also was having her own anxiety and panicking about the same things. And so I was able to hold it together for her. And then I would, later in the day, or maybe even a week later, it would just all of a sudden come out, whether it was through sobbing tears or anger, or just the inability to really see things clearly. And so after doing EMDR around that situation, I now, to this day, can go on walks. In fact, last night we went on a family walk and walked right by that place, and it does zero effect on me now. We can even talk about that the accident happened right there, and she's done her own work too. So we're really mindful of that. And if she ever feels like she can't walk that direction, we don't go that direction. But for me, myself personally, the EMDR has allowed me to be able to experience or have memories of that situation, that accident, that experience, be able to be in the same place that the accident happened, be able to go to these medical appointments that we still have to go to. And I'm okay. It doesn't affect me. I don't panic. I don't shut down. I don't have the visceral response that I was having before. The other is the situation with the coworker. The first time that I had to see him again after the situation happened, I had a complete panic attack and couldn't think clearly. I don't even know how I drove home from that location where I saw him. And after doing EMDR, I am able to see him, although granted, I haven't seen him for probably a year and a half now, but at the time, I was able to see him and it didn't affect me. I even had a conversation with him, and I was able to just have a conversation with him and know that he was not going to affect me, that what he did to me was wrong, and he would never take ownership for it, and he would never apologize, and that was on him. But I know what he did was not okay. And I had boundaries, and I was no longer going to be around him in a professional capacity. So those are two situations that it just was so amazing to me. And it felt so good to be able to have that power back, to be able to say, I can drive by these places. I can go to this place where this man works, that I don't go there anymore. But at the time, I still would have to go to that building that he worked in. I can go there and I'm okay. And it doesn't affect me and my nervous system and my body's response. And so it gives me a lot of, I think it just gives me that power back. I already said that, but that's the feeling that I have. And it feels good. And so like I said, we worked through the list. And so recently, probably in the last few months, we have started, my counselor approached me and said, hey, I'm learning a little bit more about pre-verbal trauma and EMDR. Would you be interested in kind of working through that? And so I was like, yes, because I'm all about healing from my trauma now. I'm so different than I was even 10 years ago. Like I want to keep doing better and growing and healing because I feel better. And I know that I'm better for my kids, my family, my friends, my coworkers because of it. So we worked through in utero and up to 12 months. And so we just did it in little chunks. And it is the coolest thing that I have experienced so far. I would have these sensations in my body, or I would have like a picture of somebody come into my mind or a smell. And then I would call my mom later and be like, hey, so I had this come up when we were doing EMDR around the 3rd trimester. Tell me about, and it was like, yeah, that happened, or this happened, or that smell makes sense because of A, B, and C. And so it's actually really cool to be able to know that you can never get enough healing, and that I still have stuff that I need to work through. And so it's really fun. It brings me joy to be able to know that I'm working through this pre-verbal trauma that is still in me. The body keeps a score, and it's true. It is in me. And then I still have moments. There's situations that will come up that will trigger me, that will bring me back to a place, or I'll think I'm okay, and then I'll have nightmares for a few nights, and that will be basically like a reminder for me that nope, there's something there, that if I'm having nightmares again, then I need to work through some stuff, and I'll bring that to my therapist and we'll do some more EMDR. And it just has been so incredibly healing. And although I am thankful for my first therapist that taught me about mindfulness and taught me about grounding and was there for me in that capacity, I just think that this deeper healing has been so good for my soul, for my relationships, for my heart, and for my ability to help others. So that's my story. I hope that it was inspiring to you. If you have questions about any of the modalities that I talked about, whether it's tapping, EMDR, mindful meditation, breath work, any of that, please shoot me a DM on Instagram or email me, melissa@mendingfamilieswa.com. I would be happy to chat with you more about my journey and answer any questions you might have, maybe even steer you in a direction of giving you some recommendations for therapists if you live in the area. So I just love to see families move forward in healing because I know how powerful it is. I know how beneficial it is. So that's my story about EMDR. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I am going to have my new friend, Tori Hope Peterson, on. She's an author. She is a former foster child, and she has such an inspiring story about surviving foster care, surviving childhood trauma, and she's doing some pretty awesome, amazing, cool things now that because she has done her own work in healing and continues to do her own work in healing, she's able to give back to others in some really cool ways. So come back next week because you won't regret listening to my interview with Tori. She's amazing, and I had so much fun talking to her. So, okay, I'll see you next week. Enjoy this beautiful sunshine and the warmth. Bye, everyone.